Okay, today we're going to talk about exponents, 4.2 or 4-2 exponents. So when you have something to this effect, remember exponents is your little number. So this whole thing right here is called the power. That's why sometimes you'll hear 2 to the power of 6 or something like that. Okay, the 2, the big number, is called your base. And yes, you need to know these. And 6 is called your exponent. Okay, so what this means, this does not mean 2 times 6. If it meant 2 times 6, they would have written 2 times 6. They didn't. It is 2 to the power of 6. So 2 times 2 times 2, 6 times. Okay, this is an exponent form. If you're given something like that and it says write this using an exponent, you would put 2 to the 6th power. So when we multiply all these things together, you should get 64. 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, and so on until you get 64. Okay, so base is the big number, power is the whole thing, the two numbers together, and exponent is the little bitty number. Okay, so this is probably the most confusing part of what we're going to do today. But if we have 5 to the 2nd power, then we have 5 times 5, which is 25. Okay, now what if we have negative 5 to the 2nd power? Okay, that means, let me see, make sure I write this correctly. Negative 5 times negative 5. Okay, well, negative 5 times negative 5 is still 25 because a negative times a negative is a positive. Now, where it gets confusing is when we get to this. Do you see how this negative is in the inside of the parentheses? This is not. That means that negative is not being squared, just the 5 is being squared. Okay, so this is actually read the opposite of 5 squared. So 5 times 5 squared. I'm sorry, not squared. You don't write that again. You just did it. So it's the opposite of 5 times 5. So it's going to be the opposite of 25. Okay, because 5 times 5 is 25 and you take the opposite. Or you can just think, if it's not inside the parentheses, you don't bring that negative with it when you multiply. So when we go to threes, or cubes, 5 times 5 times 5, 5 and 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. Okay? Well, what about when we have a negative? So that's negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5. Well, right here, negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive 25 times another negative 5. So that's going to be a negative 125. Remember back when we said if it was taken to an odd number, it was going to be negative. If it's taken to an even number, it's going to be positive. That is true when the negative is the one being taken. So down here, the negative is not being taken. Remember, it's the opposite of 5 times 5 times 5. Well, 5 times 5 times 5 is 125, but then you still have the negative. It's the opposite of 125. So the opposite of 125 is negative 125. This is the most confusing part. People forget, you know, if it's inside the parentheses, you have to take that negative with it. Okay. So now look up here. Here's another little example up here in the corner. Write using exponents. So if I give you something like this, or if the book gives you something like this, and you need to write it using exponents, you just count. So it's going to be 4, and I have 1, 2, 3 x's. So it'd be x cubed and y cubed. Because these are being multiplied. If they were being added together, it would be, if there were 3 x's added together, it would be 3x. Okay? So that is how you add this and this are the exact same thing. It's just written differently. This is written with exponents. This isn't. It's just a different way to write it. Okay, so let's do some problems. Oops, I misspelled evaluate. There shouldn't be another T and an A in there. Okay, so We're just going to evaluate or simplify. So with this, remember to use PEMDAS. We're finally using the E in PEMDAS, parentheses exponents. That's where this comes into play. So we have 4 times the quantity 3 plus 2 squared. So you do what's on the inside first. Okay, now we do the exponent first. So 5 squared, so it's going to be 4 times 25. Notice that I keep my parentheses, otherwise it's going to get really confusing. And then 4 times 25 is 100. Okay. So number 2 is a plug and chug. It's asking you, what is this if x is negative 2 and y is 3? So if x is negative 2, we have negative 2. Please use parentheses. Remember when I said a while ago, you need to use parentheses. This is important. That 3 is going to go outside that parentheses. And it's important, remember, because that negative has to be inside. Plus 4 times 3. Okay. So if we use our PEMDAS, we have this negative 2. Negative 2 times 3. So negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So we have negative 2 times negative 8. I did not leave myself enough room to write this. 4 times 3 is 12. I'm going to bring this up here. So we have negative 2 times negative 8 plus 12. Negative 2 times negative 8 is 16 plus 12, 28. Is that right? I just kept going. I wasn't checking. Okay, so that's the answer to number 2 there. Number 3, again, we're simplifying. There's no variables. We're not plugging and chugging. You just simplify it. So you have to use your PEMDAS. So we have to use our exponents first. So 5 times 5 is 25 plus 4. Okay, remember this is negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So 3 times 3 is positive 9. 9 times 3 is 27, so it's going to be negative 27 times 4, and we have 2 times 25 over here. So we have 2 times 25. Do I have this written down somewhere? Oh, there it is. 2 times 25 is obviously 50. Plus 4 times negative 27. Holy moly, what is that? So 27 times 4. 4 and 7 is 28. 4 and 2 is 8. So 108. So plus a negative 108. So remember, your negatives never go away. Okay? So we have 108 minus 50. And we know our answer is going to end up being negative because 108 is bigger. So we have 8, 10. We borrow. So it's going to be negative 58. Alrighty. So number 4, 3a squared plus 6 when a equals negative 5. Again, use your parentheses. So 3, negative 5. Can you guys hear my dog growling at me? He needs to go outside. Negative 5 squared. Here he is. Hey, Norm. Okay, hold on, Norman. I'll let you out. Plus 6. Okay, so again, this negative is inside the parentheses. It's very important. It's very important. So negative times a negative is a positive. So positive 25 plus 6. So 75 plus 6, which equals 81. Okay, so please show your work. Okay, show your work. Show your steps. Because these have a lot of steps. If you try to do it on your head, I promise you, you will miss it. So show your work. You'll be thankful in the end. Okay, so the last thing is anything to the 0 power is what? Do you guys know what that answer is? Anything to the 0 power. So 5 to the 0, 28 to the 0, x to the 0, What about, okay, well, let's just do this. 5 to the 0, anything to the 0 power is 1. 28 to the 0 power is 1. X to the 0 power is 1. It's not x1, it's just 1. It doesn't become 1x. So if you have xy to the 0 power, that 0 is only going to that y. So you still have x left. Y to the 0 is just 1, so you would just have x. Or you could have 5 to the 0 z. Okay, well this 5 to the 0 becomes 1, and then you have z, so you really just have z. Okay, now if you have 28xy, the whole thing to 0, then that whole thing is equal to 1, because that 0 goes to all of them, which that's a different rule. So anything to the 0 power is 1. It's kind of a weird rule, but it is true. Okay? All right, all done.